I'm here with you in Meridian, Idaho.
That's right.
You've only been living here since May, you said.
Yes, that's right.
But before we get to that, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about where you grew up and
Sure.
what that was like.
Sure.
Okay, well, my dad was born in Oakley, Idaho in 1898, and my mother was born in Orfino, Idaho in 1905. My dad was, as he grew up, he was quite athletic and inclined and became the basketball captain and all that. He and I had a very close relationship throughout my life. After my mother died, he more or less the sun rose and set in him, and he took wonderful care of me. So I had a very high ideal of my dad. And my mother was 36 when she died. She died of nephritis of the kidneys in Burley, Idaho, and she was 36 years old. I grew up in mostly Burley, Idaho. My dad was a Ford dealer there for quite a few years, and a very successful businessman. He dealt in a lot of little things that turned out to be very successful. One of them being the Idaho potato processors, where they made French fries, and that business turned out to be an excellent business and was merged eventually into Heinz Corporation. I worshiped my father, and he was a good man. He was good to his employees. Every morning, when he'd go to work, he'd go out to the shop, and the 3 or 4 mechanics we had, he'd always greet them good morning. He never missed a morning of saying good morning to his employees. And they all liked my dad. And and my dad was the sole owner and founder of that business, and he made it a good thing for me, and he made it a good thing for my Uncle Ludwig and his family. My dad died in 1959 of a massive heart attack, and so I was involved in the auto dealership there in Burley, mostly with my Uncle Ludwig, whom I never liked. I was going to the University of California June the 16th, 1957. I got that phone call. So I was going to Berkeley. I got in the car and I drove home. I was kind of shocked because of my dad's death. When I got to a place called Truckee on the Nevada border, I was so tired that I looked up an old hotel there in Truckee, and it was a kind of a flop house. And I got a room there and got a few hours sleep and got up in the morning and headed on into Burley. So I was in the midst of my master's or a master's examination. I went back to Cal and took the exam with 2 of my professors, plus I had a written paper about flour milling in colonial Pennsylvania.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it was. So I took it, and one of the hard noses of my professors was named Kenneth M. Stamp. And you were lucky if he ever spoke to you in the hallway or anything. He just kind of went on, you know. He came up to me and he said, Mr. Haight, he said, that was one of the better oral examinations I've attended. And I remember one of the key questions was, what was the difference between Herbert Hoover and Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1933 that made Roosevelt president. And I said, well, Hoover was very taciturn. He didn't speak to anybody, and he was very cold. And he came across as cold. And Franklin Roosevelt grew up in a very gregarious atmosphere, and he was always smiling, and he always had good words for everybody, and tried to be a good person to everybody. And his personality was catching. And as I grew up, most of my life, Franklin Roosevelt was the President of the United States till 1944. My dad was a very good Republican. His father was a Republican. And my grandfather, Hector Haight, his father, became a state senator from Cassia County and was for a number of years. In 1948, my dad decided to run for the Idaho Senate and was elected senator for 2 terms from Cassia County. But when I went to California, the University of California was a liberal school. And I became liberal, and I've stayed that way till to this day, and felt that most of the good programs that came about for the people of the country were under Democratic leadership. And I still think so. Anyway, I had come back to Burley, and I went into business with my uncle, and he was very hard to work with. He was quite jealous because of my dad leaving a good share of his estate to me. So finally I decided I didn't want to stay with him anymore. And I sought to buy my own dealership and ended up buying Baker Oregon Chevrolet and became the Chevrolet dealer in Baker. I went to Everett with a friend of mine from Burley. We established a Mazda dealership in Everett. I didn't do too well at that, and so then I decided that I didn't really want to be in the car business anymore.
Why?
And because I didn't like the pressure, and I didn't like the lying and cheating and the techniques of how you got ahead in the car business. So I decided to go to work in the summers for the Forest Service as a forest lookout. And I spent 14 summers as a forest lookout at a place called War Eagle out in the McCall district of the forest there. And so I spent 14 summers. But in the meantime, I got married again to Sally Gamblin, and we eventually bought a little 17-acre place out in the woods at Council, and we were going to be self-sufficient. And we had a big garden, we had a good irrigation system, and raised a couple of beef animals and raised about 4 pigs at one time. And then we'd butcher them in the fall. But we lived in Council for about 10 years. And Sally, to this very day, loved it so much with all the dogs we had and all the deer and the bear and all that sort of thing. And she still relates back to it now. But we had some wonderful years together there. We had an old wood stove in our house, and she baked bread, which was the best bread you ever ate.
I remember.
And She was a wonderful cook. I was working the summer lookout. I decided we better get off the winters in council, which were pretty steep and hard to keep up with. But we had a lot of wild apples and wild pears, and we put up a lot of fruit and canned a lot of tomatoes. And we had a nice place there in council, and we enjoyed it. And we had some very good friends there. But eventually, we sold the council place and bought this house in Grangeville. And then in the summer times, I would work with the Forest Service. So I was on Social Security then, and so between the Social Security and the Forest Service payment I got, we could make out okay. And so last winter I came down with COPD, which is a lung congestion, and had to be taken to the hospital there in Grangeville. And then we decided, well, we better sell the house in Grangeville. And we were very fortunate that real estate prices had doubled.
Wow.
And so from what we paid for the house, we were able to sell it and double our money, which then put me in this place that I'm being looked after, and Sally is being looked after. So that's where we are. We are here in Meridian. And I was born in Boise 90 years ago, so I'll probably end my life here in Boise. I don't know when, but anyway. So we're still here at 90.
That's amazing.
So that's it.
I wanted to ask you, since you've lived in so many places, which place do you think felt the most like home to you?
We made council our homestead.
Yeah.
And that felt like home more than anything. And Sally still refers to it. She's got dementia, and so occasionally she goes back and relives a lot of little things. But anyway, we've been very fortunate, both Sally and myself, to have had good parents, to have had good medical treatment. We had a doctor in Clarkston, who was our doctor for 35 years.
It's amazing to have doctors that you trust.
Right.
I interviewed someone in Portland who talked about moving from Virginia, I think, to Oregon for medical reasons.
I see.
And that's sort of what has kept her here, is access to medical treatment. What would you like your life to look like in the near future, or where would you like to see yourself in the near future?
I'd like to see myself about where I am now, and having good thoughts about caring for people, for loving people. And most of the people here at this care center are super good, and they're mostly Mexican. They've been so good and taken very good care of us. So that's where we are.
Great. Thank you so much, Grandpa.
I hope you enjoy it. And
people will find your story really interesting.
I look after Sally day in and day out, and that's my most important thing, is taking care of her. She's my best partner. I'm going to give you a little gift, and I'm going to give you $50.
Grandpa, you don't have to do
No, I want to do that to help you want you to use it for whatever you want.
If you insist, I'll
I do.
Okay.
You'll never, that's a gift.
Thank you so much.
And I appreciate your coming to
What
see me.
What would you most like me to spend this on?
On anything you want.
On anything.
Anything you want. You spend it on what you like.
Okay, I'm gonna have to think of the craziest thing I can spend it on this trip, and I'll let you know what that is.